be in life after wartime. I was born in 1955, and London was still in a ruinous condition. It was terrible. There were bomb sites everywhere, which were used for temporary car parking spaces. There was terrible deprivation. The country was ruined, and a large section of the population were considering emigration, mostly to Australia, because you could go to Australia for a $15 price. It was subsidised by the Australian government to try and get Brits to go over there. And I lived in a slum in South London, which had no heating, no hot water, and it was no bathroom at all, and no inside toilet, which was quite normal. I mean, it was, but it was quite grim as well. And my grandmother lived round the corner, and the house next door had been bombed, but they hadn't bothered to knock it down, or they didn't have the money. So the house next door, which I loved playing in as a child, had a huge circular hole through the roof, and then through the first floor, and then through the ground floor. They'd taken the bomb away, I guess, and or at least defused it. So I would play on a bomb site in all of this rubble and kibble and stuff, and so we didn't have anything. We had a bath once a week, and I was second in the bath, which was quite good. When we, so it was a very different life of I guess extreme poverty. I mean, my mother though was even more poor than that. She when in the 1930s they were moved from one slum to another slum. All of their possessions would fit onto a cart about that big, which were a hand-driven cart. And she remembers her brother picking up orange peel in the gutter to eat, because they didn't have any food. So it was, ours wasn't as bad as that, but it's really hard for Americans to get that, because you've never had war on American soil, and it was.
Well, we didn't start ourselves.
Oh no, you didn't start ourselves. Oklahoma City, of course. Yeah. Put that to one side. Yeah. But so it was a very different life, and my father was an electrician who left school at 13, and we didn't have any literary books in the house. You know, we might have the Reader's Digest Guide to British Birds bought from a thrift store, but the house was full of junk and stuff from thrift stores, really. Jumble sales they were called in England. So we wore all our clothes were second hand. But then my father and a group of other working class men built a house in a greenfield site. The government was encouraging people to build their own homes, and they did that. And we moved there when I was, I don't know, about 3 or 4 years old, and it was like paradise to me. We still didn't have any heating, but we did have an inside bathroom, and unfortunately, my parents had another child, so there was now 3 in the bath. But I was still second. But they had 5 eventually, and it was like a dead pool. It was this gloopy brown mass of horrible water. And but it was we were very, very, very poor, but it seemed to me like a blessed existence, really.
Yeah. Well, there's something interesting you talk about in the book about the class system, and how when you went to school, you kind of had to speak one way, and then you code switched, and then you talked to your family and you had to switch into a more working class thing. I mean, what was that like?
Well, I speak now a version of received pronunciation and London English, and I'm very upset actually. My daughter thinks I speak posh, and because I say croissant. She said, you do speak posh, you say croissant. I said, it's fucking French. Anyway, I guess up to the age of 11, I think I must have had my dad was a Cockney, so to talk like this, no, and it's all that. He used to speak in rhyming slang, which to Americans, it's using this sort of, you'd say, oh, what a pen and ink means what a stink, you know, or plates of meat at your feet, you know, apples and pears and stairs, that kind of thing. He didn't use it that often, but he did say pen and ink quite a lot, because we all farted so much. But I guess I must have spoken like that. And then I had a free place at one of Britain's elite schools. And I always say to Americans that British people always say the opposite of what it actually means. So I went to public school, which of course means a private school. So I went, and it was a very, very posh private school. We wore boaters, we wore chocolate grey suits. We went to school 6 days a week. We worked from like 20 to 9 till 20 past 4 with 2 hours of homework every day. It was like hyper competitive. And on my first day, I went to school, and I remember I used to say, in old dialect, I used to say 5 and 20 past. You might see this in Charles Dickens, or 5 and 22. And they laughed at me because I was annoyed. Oh, how hilarious. 5 and 22. And so a week later, after going to school, my father said to me, "How come you speak so posh?" So I assumed that my accent had migrated from probably talking like this to talking more like I do now, I guess.
I like the idea of you as like a 7-year-old Michael Caine.
Whatever.
Yeah, but that must have. I mean, there's a thing that I think that is like a through line for your music, from that experience to your music to this book, is that you've always been kind of the fish out of water. You've always taken like a different path. You've always had missed the opportunity, taken the opportunity to miss an opportunity.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of this remarkable sort of original trajectory. Yeah. And I don't know if that was intentional or.
I think it's obviously the class structure in Britain is really, really rigid, and to migrate from one class to another is quite difficult, and social mobility is almost non-existent. You get clever boys like me. For example, I got a free place at this school, and then you become absorbed into the haute bourgeoisie. I mean, and then you kind of disappear, and you carry with you. I carry with me a sort of sense of real irritation and sort of subliminal anger, I suppose, at it all, despite the fact that I was the beneficiary of this thing. I had been plucked from this background, and yet it's oppressive, and it denies working class kids a good education. It denies them opportunities because of the way they sound and because of what they look like. And that really was something I was very strongly aware of. And then when I got interested in politics and things, you start seeing the structure of it.
Right, and then that comes out in the music.
Yes, and I when I was 11, the third piece of music that really changed my life was I heard Highway 61 revisited by Bob Dylan in an art class at the school, and the older boys, 17, the 18-year-olds, were playing this stuff, and we didn't have a record player at home. We didn't have a record player. We didn't have any music. My parents never listened to music, so it was a very, very quiet house, except for the TV being on all the time. And then I heard this stuff, and I was reading like mad. I read all the time, and I heard it, and I suddenly heard this guy writing about culture, writing about the Bible mixed up with beat poetry, and writing about sort of oppression and all that stuff. And kids are really smart, and I thought, I'm with that guy. I'm not going to be with the fascists and the straights and the creeps.
Squares.
And the squares.
Yeah.
Yeah. The L7s.
Yeah, and then.
Yeah, and that was really important to me. And I would hear them talking. It was a very open place to hear discussions about culture. You know, we'd have things like the last Whole Earth catalogue, sort of like
Stuart Brand.
Yeah. And you talk about that. And you talk about the Ways of Seeing by John Berger, things like that. Great Marxist writer about art and culture. And as soon as you start sort of digging into all that, it starts becoming really thrilling. Yeah, it really affected me.
Yeah, and so was there ever a time when you were like studying that stuff, reading that stuff, and then feeling like, I don't know, there's some sort of disconnect with your home life or with your parents?
Yes, I think it was because I never saw my father read a book. I mean, there weren't any books. Although I did find a copy of...
Joy of Sex?
No, certainly not.
Oh yeah, sorry.
I don't think they did that kind of thing. But it was a James Bond book, and it was tucked in the bottom of a drawer. And I think, I read it. I was very excited. I think it was the first thriller I'd ever read, and I thought, this is great. I mean, what a life that is. You go around in Savile Row suits, you gamble, you smoke, you drink, you sleep with glamorous women, you have fights. I thought, that's the job I want.
You're working for the government.
Yeah. Well, that was the downside. That's why I turned it down.
Good choice.
Yeah.
So did you have, when you went back and you're telling all these stories, and I believe they're fairly truthful in the book, did you have any sort of trepidation or fears about like being too truthful?
I actually tried to be genuinely truthful, and in fact, Hugo's sitting here in the second row, and I often, like with the band stuff, I would say, did this really happen? And most of the time we agreed, and sometimes if we disagreed, I take Hugo's version of events to be more likely to be true than mine. But I did try to write it. I didn't want to write anything that was unkind, though. I didn't want to write things that sort of were a bit snarky about people. And but there were lots of things in there which struck me as having been odd in my life. And the school was very violent as well. I forgot to say that. We were beaten the whole time and hit the whole time. One of my great, it's not a fond memory at all really, but I was in a geography lesson once as an example of the humdrum violence, and I was sort of dozing off in this rather warm room, and the population of South Africa or something like that, or the industrial output of Bhutan or something, and I was dozing off, and the teacher came behind me really quietly, grabbed the back of my head, went bang, and banged my head into the desk to wake me up. And obviously it did wake me up. And but that was slightly better than he used to throw those really large wooden erasers for the blackboard.
Oh yeah.
Really hard. I think he'd been a grenadier in the Second World War or something. Throw it as hard as he could, bounce it off your head in the class if you weren't paying attention. So it did. That's why public school boys are always very good in prison. Because we're so used to all of this abuse.
How do you hit a kid with a boater on? They're too cute.
No, you don't wear boats in cars.
Oh, all right.
No.
Oh, well, there.
God forbid.
Yeah. Well, was there anything that surprised you about writing this book? Or even the process of writing a book?
I found it really difficult. I mean, Debbie, my wife, is sitting there, and she comes from a literary family, and she spotted my resistance to. I mean, I'd sort of make a fifth cup of tea, look out the window, sort of polish my knee. Or something like that. Debbie would say, "Go into the studio and make me go," and it's a very solitary thing. I mean, it's a bit of a banal observation, really. But writing a song, you have a bit of a feedback to it. It's quite quick and zippy, and you tend to bounce it off with your band members, and you sort of say, how does this work? Do you think this works? And you can fiddle around with it. And I found it quite difficult. And about halfway through, I felt like giving the money back. I mean, I was.
Which is that writers never do that.
No.
The first rule of being a writer is never give the money.
No, that's what Debbie said. Yeah, so never give the money back. So I got through that, and then I think some things happened, and I found writing it quite moving. Some of the things that I remember then, the gags were one thing, and then with the other thing with the memories of events, and there were lots of sad things that happened to us all, but to write about them in a way which is not, moribund or just trying to be sort of
treacly
or trying to get sympathy is difficult. but I found it all quite, it got its own momentum after a while.
Yeah.
But it did take a lot of, I think, encouragement.
Yeah. And the book is really, I mean, you'll find when you read it, it's really, the voice is so sincere. It's genuine, it's really an authentic voice. It's really nice.
And I also hate adverbs. So I wanted to avoid adverbs. Anyone who's read a Harry Potter book, Harry smiled winsomely, or something like that. Any word that ends in ly really annoyed me. So I was avoiding adjectives, and people use far too many adjectives about everything.
Really?
And so I was trying to avoid adverbs and adjectives and anything else that began with A.
That's basically graduate school education in writing.
Exactly.
Just like cut out that and finish it.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted it to sound a bit like Lee Child writing Cider with Rosie, was what in my mind. But I didn't really achieve that. I couldn't get any fights in there. Not too many of them anyway. Some.
There were some.
Yeah.
Well, I have some other questions, but I think maybe it's time to open it up. But I have one more that I've been dying to ask all these years.
Yeah.
So, when you sing Heat Sent in the Army, right?
Yeah.
You bashed the microwave.
Yeah.
How many, over all these years, how many small appliances have you destroyed in your career?
Well, I like to think, if I'm denied entrance to someone, I say, do you know who I am? I'm the world's leading microwave artist. But we have it on the rider, and in big letters next to it say, "This is not a joke." We did a gig once in Belgium, and the Belgian promoter obviously thought it was a joke, and there was no thing there. And I said, "Do you know who I am?" And they went to try and find a microwave and failed miserably. And instead he got a full-size walk-in refrigerator, which I played on stage. It didn't sound so good though.
No, but
I probably got through several hundred. Yeah.
I would reckon you might be up to 1,000.
Yeah. I should be sponsored by sort of.
Gang of Four, sponsored by Samsung.
Samsung.
Only if the microwave survived it, right?
Yeah.
Then it'd be like, if you made a Pop-Tart at the end of the song.
It is a rule though that it can't be a new microwave. It has to be an old one or from a thrift store. So the Belgian promoter said, "I'll just go and buy one," and you can't do that. This is proposed.
So everywhere you go, there's some assistant who's going home and taking their only appliance and bringing it for you to mash.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
It's true. Yeah, I think that's probably right.
Yeah.
Any questions from the audience?
Okay.
At your shows, and we were at the Fonda, and you have the graphics in the back, and then you spoke to the importance of the flags.
Yes.
And I thought that really added a lot to the show to me and gave me an insight a little bit into you. And I was wondering if you might talk a little bit more about why you do that, the importance of making those statements.
Well, we're living in dark times, aren't we, for democracy, and we all have to fight hard for it. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the fights that we had in Rock Against Racism and in the 1970s, and fights against fascists on the streets in those days. And I think it's worse now in this country. I don't need to tell you that, but we need to own our own traditions. So the American flag, America's, and I'm saying that something we all know, it's a promise, not a destination. It's a promise of democracy. It's a promise of tolerance, and every man is equal under God. And so that flag is really important. That Democrats and progressive people are thinking, oh, it's not just the property of that. And so, and in Britain as well, very few public buildings have the British flag, apart from the royal houses, and it's quite often seen actually as the sign of someone who's very right-wing to have a British flag. And so the possessing that thing, owning it, and owning it for a righteous purpose, owning it because we believe in a better future where we're kind to each other, and when we look after the weak and the poor and the disadvantaged, like the Pope said, the former Pope said, as defining what Christianity was, looking after the poor and the weak and the disadvantaged, and that's what happens in a good society. We don't abandon people. So that's the point of the flags. And the LGBTQ flag, where we see this assault now on gay rights, the assault on black people's rights.
Use a mic.
Oh yes. I've never used a mic before. I don't know if it's working. But so, and then the Black Lives Matter flag, and again these things we had, in our case, we had Rock Against Racism that we were really, really heavily involved in. And we were in a campaign, a nationwide campaign against fascist and extreme right wing, and we won. We won. So it's just to say, we may be aged and around a long time, but you can win these fights. You just have to fight.
Right.
I'm afraid.
I do think it's I think it's the responsibility of artists to take a political stance.
Yeah. I mean, in the audience is Shepard Fairey, who's is a great friend, and his work is that is the responsibility, I think, of artists. And in the 30s, Picasso's Guernica was something which ignited the whole world's awareness of what was going on in Spain. And I think our salvation is going to be in culture. We can't fight battles about money and notes. We can fight money and culture, and that's what I think.
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it's like changing the perception of like sexuality or stuff like that, like even the German artists in the 1920s,
Yes,
were doing all this kind of stuff.
yeah. So is that the answer?
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
To piggyback on that question, can you talk about touring with Public Enemy?
Yeah, that was quite funny, really. Us, Public Enemy, and Sisters of Mercy. And Andrew Eldritch used to be a roadie of ours as well.
Mike.
Sorry, microphone. I've got my producer here. Anyway, it was quite funny, and wondering who was going to get banned from whichever venue first. I remember we played in the Hall of the Daughters of the American Revolution in Washington, and I was talking with the Public Enemy. They got banned first. So it was us and Andrew Eldritch's lot, and we got banned somewhere else. I can't remember why. I think for being commies or something. And they were nice guys. I mean, I remember talking to Chuck D about his show. I like your show. It's very camp, isn't it? Which he didn't like because they had these guys with in their camouflage wear and these Uzi submachine guns. I'm assuming they're replicas. And they'd stand up and they'd twiddle them around.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a bit like watching RuPaul's Drag Race. And I thought it was really funny. And but they were nice guys, and we got on very well. And I really liked what Public Enemy did. I mean, their music's fantastic. I mean, what a great band. I like them way more than Sisters of Mercy. The funny thing that happened with them, though, was that they were always trying to upstage Sisters of Mercy by turning up so late they went on last, which never succeeded. But it was really good fun, and I was really glad to be on the tour. And eventually, it was cancelled, I think, because there was so much opposition to what we were all doing. Oh yeah.
A little unfair,
Yeah.
but I'm going to ask you, to the degree that you were able to talk about all the different lineups, because it's pretty insane. If you're really a fan.
Well, when we started, Hugo, who's sitting here, and me and Andy Gill started up a band, and we needed a bass player. And the very first bass player was a guy who was a great jazz funk player, Dave Wolfson. But he was ridiculously busy, And so after a couple of shows, in a friendly way, we said it's not going to work out, and we found Dave Allen, and Dave Allen was certainly the best musician of us all. Yeah. Dave turned up in response to an advertisement, which still puzzles me, that Hugo put out. It said, "Rhythm and blues." What was it, Hugo?
Rhythm, R-I-V-V-U-M, and blues.
There we go.
Yeah, it was a signifier for punk rock, code for punk rock, and but Dave had been in a band that played country and western songs, show tunes, all that kind of stuff. He knew how to play everything, and when he turned up, he brought the funk, and he and I bonded over our shared love of the meters, like Sissy Strut and the hand clapping song, and he could play it as well. Me and Andy and Hugo were pretty poor at this stuff, and so Dave was much further up the musical hill than we were, and so that was the first incarnation of the band. And then when Dave left and formed Street Bank after that, we were looking around for someone else to join the band for a short period of time. After Dave left, it was in the middle of a tour, and we were going to be bankrupted if we didn't get from New York to Seattle. We had 48 hours to find a bass player and teach them the entire set. And our label manager at Warner Brothers said, we said, no, it's going to be impossible. We're just going to give up, fold the band, it's over. And he said, look, give me an hour or so. And he came back and he said, we've got Bill Laswell, who was up for that. Jaco Pastorius wanted to play with us for a weather report, which has been funny. And Buster Jones, who we'd all met playing with Talking Heads. And Buster Jones was the obvious choice. And he came into the rehearsal room, and we had like 10 hours or something to rehearse it. And he said, you guys may be nervous, but I am the man. We went, oh, okay. And we did do it, and we then flew over to Seattle and played this amazing stuff. And we thought he'd stay with us, but the Rolling Stones offered him a gig, and he then backed out. And we then found Sarah Lee. So going through all these incarnations, it was always sort of force majeure to an extent.
That first show with Buster Jones, though.
Oh,
I was there. It was really
sensational.
amazing.
Yeah, and in the crowd, there was the 15-year-old Kurt Cobain, and there was Eddie Vedder, just sort of
Taking notes.
It was pretty sensational. But I think every time you play with someone new, you learn something more about maybe what the music's about. And quite a few times I think I had forgotten what the music was about, and then you're reminded of it when you have to sort of relearn it. Because I think it's a very common thing to not like to listen to your own music, so you only do it when you have to, and then you think about it. I don't know if that's a good answer.
Well, there's more lineup changes, but we can
go on.
It goes on.
But at the moment, the tour we've recently done, Gail Greenwood, who was in L7, and Belly, who's just sensational. Ted Leo, who came from the hardcore punk rock scene over in the Northeast. But what a great technical guitarist, and honouring what Andy had come up with, which is what we want. We want to honour the thing and then say, but you do your own thing. And I don't know if any of you saw any of the recent shows, but what a great guitarist. Oh, man.
Yeah. And he brought, like Paho too.
David, fantastic.
Played the parts, but then brought their own thing to it. It was really cool.
And David, very wonderful technical player. Reminded me of Bob Fripp, who we used to bump into, that kind of thing. It's really, really interesting to see it come alive again.